28 minutes to 8 this morning. You're watching Morning Live, and quite an interesting spread here in the New Age newspaper. National Consumer Commission, the Parliament passed Consumer Protection Act number 68 of 2008 ensures the rights of the public, that's you and I, are protected in the goods and services market. And why am I highlighting this? Well, that's because the rest of the program will be coming to us from Sandton, where Peter Ndoro will be discussing this very issue. He's joined by Ebrahim, Mohamed, the Commissioner of the National Consumer Commission, as well as a number of panelists who are seated right next to Peter this morning, in and around the audience as well. So Peter, without further ado, it's good morning to you.
A very good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to everybody that's watching the program, not just from South Africa, but also neighboring countries watching us on DSTV channel 404. Yes, this indeed is the venue for the latest in a series of New Age business briefings, and that's brought to you by the SABC, and today very kindly sponsored by Transnet. And yes, the National Consumer Commission is in focus today, and this is a body that, as you were saying, Ayanda, when we think about the Consumer Protection Act 68 of 2008, essentially key piece of legislation that's kind of brought us here into this conversation. There's other legislation as well, the Credit Act, for example, that you'd be aware of. All of these come together to help you, but we're going to unpack the Consumer Commission itself, why it was set up, what it's supposed to be doing, how it's helping you, how you can access it, and what difference it's making to advancing the protection of consumers in South Africa. But I guess it's not just about protecting the consumer as well. For every right that you have, there's a responsibility, and we'll unpack those as well. So if you want to be part of this conversation, hashtag TNA BizBrief at Morning Live SABC. Whatever your consumer issues are, please raise them today, and we'll try and get an answer or direct you to the right people that will be able to help. But to take us through this conversation, it's a great pleasure to welcome our guests. And I'm going to start with the man in the middle, the Commissioner, Mr. Ebrahim Mohamed. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us, and welcome.
Well, thank you for having us here today.
All right, and you're joined by two beautiful ladies, which is fantastic. We normally have a lot of men on the panel, but today I'm glad to see that the majority are ladies. And next to you is the Deputy Commissioner, Ms. Thezi. Welcome to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
All right, and for those of you at home who might not know, the National Consumer Commission actually is in the DTI group. And from the DTI is the Deputy Director General Consumer and Corporate Regulation, Ms. Zodwa Ntuli. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the New Age and SABC for the invitation.
Great. All right, let's get into this conversation. We're going to get to your tweets and also to our audience here in Sandton, just north of Johannesburg, to chat about these issues that we're going to be raising. I'm going to start with you, Commissioner. The NCC, why was it set up, and what is it that you're supposed to be doing?
Let me begin by talking about the CPA, the Consumer Protection Act. The Consumer Protection Act sets out the basic protection that must be afforded to all consumers. It also sets out the norms and standards that must be followed and adhered to by all in the country. The NCC was born on the, I think, 1st of April 2011. That was the effective date for the the NCC to commence operations, and we started with a bang. What happened was we had gone public to invite consumers nationally to lodge their complaints with the NCC, with the Commission. What happened is we received a flood of complaints that we were unable to deal with adequately. And for the first 2 years, it was rather turbulent. But what transpired thereafter, in 2012, there was a change in the leadership at the NCC, and we revised our strategy. We looked at the Act again, we looked at the Consumer Protection Act, and particularly at the section, I think it's section 99. Section 99 speaks to the NCC, the Commission, being responsible for the promotion of the informal resolution of consumer disputes, and is not responsible to get directly involved in attempting to resolve them or to adjudicate on them. What does that mean? And then further on, Section 99 also stipulates that the main function of the National Consumer Commission is to investigate complaints, to investigate unfair market conduct. The Act also talks to, and the word promotion is used in the Act. What does that mean? We interpreted that to mean that we need to encourage other agencies, industries, to get involved in the area of consumer protection, so that consumer disputes are resolved firstly at the shop floor, at the point of sale. But the Act also provides for industry codes to be accredited by the Minister, so that industry themselves can deal with all of these complaints, and that the load, therefore, will not be on one small body sitting in Pretoria, unable to deal with thousands of complaints. What has happened to date? We have had the motor industry code that has been accredited, and we've had just very recently, the consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods code that has been accredited. This has alleviated much of the burden that the NCC had when faced with all these thousands of complaints.
Right. We're going to unpack a lot of some of the things that you've said. I guess it's just a great way to introduce the conversation. But I'm going to turn to you, Deputy DG. We have so many. We've got ombuds. We've got various bodies that deal with consumer drama, consumer issues and concerns. Why did the DTI feel it necessary to set up this commission?
Well, thanks for that question. I think the question is particularly relevant because the Commissioner has already alluded to the framework, really, that there are structures, there are industry codes, there are the various consumer protection bodies that exist, the civil society organizations that are also dealing with consumers. But I think the main thing about this legislation is to bring coherence and to ensure that each and every consumer in whatever sector you are is equally protected. So it sets the norms and standards for all of these other bodies to actually draw from, meaning that it is the base, where you can't go under. You must either up your standards and so that the consumer is sufficiently protected. So if you look at it within the economic sphere of things, if you look at consumer confidence does impact on our businesses. If consumers do not interact with the market, if consumers do not buy goods, if consumers' confidence is affected in such a way that it impacts on their transactional decisions, then you actually have an economy that is not going to function properly. So you need to ensure that your consumer is particularly protected so that they can have confidence in the market that they're interacting with. And therefore, as the Commissioner said, ideally, the complaints must be resolved at the shop floor, meaning that at the point of sale, at the point of interaction with the consumer. Hence, we always say, if you have a dispute or you are not satisfied as a consumer, go to the party that you transacted with. Try and have them to resolve that. And that is where the industry codes now are coming in, where, for instance, the motor industry would say, this is how we will resolve disputes if they arise in our sector. And if that is adequately done, then there is actually no need for matters in that industry to even be elevated to the Consumer Commission, because the Consumer Commission is supposed to look at, the broader aspects of consumer protection and ensure that consumers are protected. But if matters are not addressed within the context of the industry structures, then the consumers should feel free to elevate them to the Consumer Protection Authority that is set up by government to oversee that. But I think the one thing that I also want to indicate is that in the CPA itself, it does encourage the cooperation framework in terms of how the Commission must work with the provincial consumer offices, how it must work with the industry ombuds, And then so that at the end of the day, we are drawing, all of us are drawing from the same piece of legislation, and we can provide the adequate consumer protection that is necessary. Yes, our consumers are said to be the most protected, you know, I think if you compare to a number of countries. But I think the reality of that is when the consumer starts feeling protected. That is where we are wanting to get to, where the consumer feel that when they go to a shop or where they go into a financial institution, they feel that they're going to be treated very fairly and they do not have doubts. That is the next step for us. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So the rationale is there, the plan, the legislation is there, and I'm just wondering, in the 3 years that your office has kind of been functioning and running, how much of a difference would you say has been made in the lives of consumers? What's changed in your view, Ms. Mabuza?
What we see that it has changed is actually the understanding of what their rights are, and most of our consumers now are starting to separate and understand that if I have a complaint, where do I start? It's not actually most of the people within the far-lying areas and all that. You normally find that in the urban areas we've started to make some inroads in understanding that I've got rights, and then in understanding that when actually I feel that my rights are being either contravened or so, then I've got somewhere to go. And what we have seen for now is that together ourselves and the provinces have started to gel and work together. We realize that if we don't converse, then actually the consumer is the one that actually feels the brand. We have also started to work with our other regulators. I would name, but you know, like our national regulator for specific standards, wherein if we are looking at maybe the recent issue of the paraffin stoves, wherein we know that we have to enforce there, but then we have the expertise out there of the other ombuds or the other regulators within our camp that we can draw from and go together and then look at those standards in a holistic manner. And then you will know that when we're looking at now what the businesses has to do, like wherein you have your own internal mechanisms, is wherein now when we start conversing with the different ombuds, now the Consumer Goods Council and then with the motor industry, wherein the people that will be subscribing in the industry, they will both have to ensure that we have those mechanisms clearly displayed so that if a consumer walks into a point of sale, they know exactly that if I am not happy, this is the recourse. So we've seen that gelling, and for now, in terms of the statistics as well, we've started collecting statistics. We know exactly which are the hotspots, and then we can zoom into specific industries. Hence now, when we look at now, our attention when we started focusing on the different ombuds, we looked at the hotspots like the motor industry and then the Consumer Goods Council, because it's where we get the plethora of all our complaints. But then what is also interesting as well, that we think that it has been a gain, it's on the issue of the product recall. Now what we see business having confidence to say that if I've got a number of complaints on a particular product and then the people are not happy, or it's a product that's coming in more often, they go out and do their own testing. They communicate with us and say, hey, we could see that here we have a problem. Can you assist us? And then we do a recall together. And in that instance, we stop a number of other ramifications that can come from consumers being injured and all that. It's that consumer confidence and then also the market confidence in the manner in which the Commission approaches certain businesses.
So there's been a steady growth in consumer awareness and empowerment, and also, I guess, better behavior by business as a result. Okay, we'll unpack all of that, and I know there's a lot you want to say and questions that are going to be raised, and the viewers at home are also going to start weighing into this conversation because this affects them very much. So please, hashtag TNA BizBrief at Morning Live SABC. We'll see you right after this break.